that front.
Great. I want to get back to that, but first I have to throw Senator Coons a softball. I can't ignore the elephant in the room, but I want to ask you to reflect on another matter that's top of mind. You're a close friend of President Biden, co-chair of his campaign, and I know you're incredibly proud of the achievements of the past 3 years of this administration. But the last 3 weeks must have been incredibly difficult for you, as calls have mounted on Biden to lead.
Great softball so far, Ellen.
I'm sure they're difficult for him. What factors do you think he is weighing or has been weighing as he decides how to proceed?
That's it?
I want to hear the answer, and then I'll
look,
follow
just
up.
to be brief, because this is an internal party matter and a matter of the campaign that is playing out very publicly. I think our president is weighing what he should weigh, which is who is the best candidate to win in November and to carry forward the Democratic Party's values and priorities in this campaign. He has been an exceptional president. He has campaigned effectively. He has led effectively. I'll just briefly reference last week, which was, unless I misremember, the NATO summit.
Right.
And folks like me, who after what was a very bad debate performance said, you got to get out there, you got to do more work, you got to campaign harder, you got to do press conferences, you got to do long-form interviews. He had a week where we had our 31 NATO allies and 5 other heads of state, at least, in Washington. And he chaired bilat after bilat, meeting after meeting, 3 days of a NATO summit, strongest NATO's ever been, did a press conference, did campaign events, did campaign rallies, and there are folks still saying he is not strong enough or capable enough to be our next president. I disagree.
Okay. Certainly.
I'll note for the record that was not really meant to be an applause line, but thank you to the very few of you who applauded.
Have you talked to him recently, in the last few days at all?
I'm not going to get into the details of our private conversations, but I am confident he is hearing what he needs to hear from colleagues, from the public, from folks. The number of people who've given me input this week from here, people I grew up with in Delaware, former roommates, ex-girlfriends, people I didn't realize still had my cell phone number. I mean, with all due respect,
what did they say?
Literally people who ride the train with me, people who are my neighbors, people who are journalists, people who are friends. There is a lot of concern and anxiety about this because the stakes are so significant. The consequences of this election are profound. The differences between our two candidates, our likely nominee Joe Biden, the nominee Donald Trump, the differences are stark, and the differences in our parties are stark. And there is a huge amount of concern about the consequences of this election. The one thing that unites every Democrat I've heard from is they believe Donald Trump should not be returned to the White House. And I will say this, not meaning to be overly sharp. His former vice president, Secretary of Defense, Chief of Staff, and National Security Advisor have also said he should not be returned to the White House. And I think we should listen to that group of individuals who had direct experience with his leadership capabilities. I recognize that this is a sharp and partisan issue, and I did not mean to open the can, but you did.
No,
so
well,
here we are.
Okay. Now I'm going to close it for a little bit because time is running and I have the world to get through here. I don't think we'll get all the way through it, but let me at least talk a little bit about NATO, the summit last week in Washington, and obviously, you know, you mentioned some of the partners that came and met and projected sort of a sense of unity and support for the big issue, Ukraine, right? Ukraine came away with some, but not all, of what it wanted. It got reassurances of an irreversible path to membership, but no official invitation or timeline. Secretary Blinken spoke to this a little in the last panel. But I do want to ask you all, do you think NATO should have provided a clearer path, an official invitation with a timeline to 3 years, whatever it is, to send a signal to Vladimir Putin that the alliance is dead serious about backing Ukraine and is in it for the long term? Okay. Anyone?
I think we have taken consistent and strong action before, during, and after Russia's broad spectrum invasion now just over 2 years ago. I think the strategic sharing of intelligence in advance of the invasion. I think building a coalition, not just of our NATO allies, but of 50 countries around the world who have burden shared with us and have invested as much as we have. And I think the signals that have been sent, both through munitions, through support, through financial investments, and through what Secretary Blinken was talking about, which is strengthening Ukraine's ability, investing in its munitions industry. I do think we are sending all the signals we need to. I don't think we should say, in this many months, you will be admitted to NATO. But I do think we need to send as strong a signal as we possibly can that we will continue to fight for Ukraine, we'll continue to invest in Ukraine. Look, Republican support for Ukraine in the Senate has been strong, has been encouraging, has been forceful, and so has Democratic support for Ukraine. There is a lot of attention paid to what is a very small segment of the Republican caucus in the House and Senate that has spoken out against funding. And there have been criticisms of the Biden administration for the timing of weapons deliveries.
Yes.
What I wish we would say with one strong and clear voice is there is a consistent, sustained commitment to Ukraine, regardless of the path forward.
I think it's less important what the timeline is for Ukraine's admission into NATO than it is that we continue to support Ukraine and that Putin not prevail. I don't know anybody who believes... I don't know anybody with any sense of history who believes that Putin will stop at Ukraine. And the Ukrainians have been incredible in terms of their will to fight. And but I do think there's a very important point with regard to NATO. NATO needs to do more. I think that's something President